In 1900, over 2 million children were working across America, in mills, mines, fields, and factories. They labored long hours, earned pennies, and rarely saw daylight. Child labor was legal, brutal, and hidden. Out of sight, out of mind. Until one man used his lens to expose it all and bring their faces back into the light. Welcome to Animata Historia, breathing life into historic photographs from around the world to remind us of how we used to live, where we came from, and what made us who we are today. In this episode, we are reanimating the photos of Lewis Hine that helped bring an end to child labor in America. At the turn of the 20th century, childhood in America didn't mean schoolyards and games. It meant sweatshops, coal mines, and survival. Children as young as 5 worked 10 to 12-hour days, stooped in fields, hunched over looms, crawling through tight mine shafts. They were cheap, obedient labor, and they were invisible. Until one man picked up a camera and refused to look away. His name was Lewis Hine, a sociologist turned photographer. But what he truly became was a warrior for justice. Hine believed the camera could be a tool of truth. Speaking about his time working as a photographer.
In the early days of my child labor activities, I was an investigator with a camera attachment. But the emphasis became reversed until the camera stole the whole show. If I could tell the story in words, I wouldn't need to lug around a camera.
Between 1908 and 1924, he traveled across America, on assignment from the National Child Labor Committee, risking threats and violence to photograph what the public wasn't meant to see.
Textile mills in South Carolina, glass factories in Indiana, coal mines in Pennsylvania, cotton fields in Mississippi. He found them all. Tiny hands stained by labor, eyes dulled by exhaustion, futures already fading. Hine didn't just take pictures, he took evidence. Each photo was meticulously captioned with names, ages, hours worked, wages earned. He was building a case, not against a person, but against an entire system. His photographs were published in newspapers, reports, and public lectures. They shocked the nation. They sparked debate in Congress. They stirred the conscience of a generation.
At the time of the 1900 U.S. Census, 1 in 6 children between the ages of 5 and 10 participated in the workforce. In fact, at the time, child labor made up 20% of the entire workforce. Most were out of school and illiterate because their parents had no choice but to send them to work so that they could help support their family.
Children toiled in dangerous factories for long hours. In 1900 alone, about 1 million people were injured in factory jobs, many of them children. More than half of child laborers were in hazardous work. Fast-moving machinery mangled hands and severed fingers. Some children fell asleep from exhaustion and were pulled into the machines. Others died in explosions, cave-ins, and fires. In New York, children younger than 14 were banned from factory work by state law, but that didn't apply to sweatshops in homes, where children would bring unfinished garments home to sew late into the night. If they were lucky, they lived in new law tenements with some lighting and ventilation. More often, families lived in overcrowded, dark, and unsanitary buildings. These children, many from immigrant families, labored unseen. Breaker boys worked 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, in the coal mines of Pennsylvania, separating slate from coal by hand. Asthma and black lung were common. Many lost limbs or were crushed under mounds of coal, where dust so thick it obscured vision penetrated deep into the boys' lungs. Supervisors often beat them into compliance. This young man was a driver in the Brown Mine, West Virginia, in September of 1908. He had been driving pack animals for 1 year, working from 7 to 5:30 p.m. daily. 15-year-old Vance worked for several years in a West Virginia coal mine, making 75 cents a day for 10 hours of work. All he did all day was open and shut the door. Taken in 1908, this photo shows a boy standing inside the Turkey Knob Mine in McDonald, West Virginia. The boy had to stoop on account of the low roof, as the photo was taken more than a mile inside the mine. One photo shows a group during their noon hour at the Ewan Breaker. This young man takes a break outside the mine to eat some well-earned lunch. Despite public outcry, enforcement was weak. Families and employers often forged documents to keep children employed. Eventually, new technology made breaker boys obsolete. Education laws and Hine's powerful imagery finally helped end the practice by 1920. From the choking dust of the coal mines where breaker boys crouched over sharp rock and blackened stone, we turn to another corner of America's industrial age, the cotton mills. Here, too, children traded childhood for survival, tending looms and bobbins in rooms thick with lint and noise. Whether deep underground or inside towering brick factories, young hands kept the wheels of industry turning, their labor silent, but essential to the nation's rise. Cotton dust filled the air, leading to lung disease. Children replaced bobbins as doffers or worked as spinners. Some were as young as 5. One young girl in Lincolnton, North Carolina, stares out a window. She had worked there more than a year, and she was just 10. Another child, 51 inches tall, ran 4 sides of the spinning machine and sometimes worked night shifts. She didn't even know her own age, but she confessed, "I'm not old enough to work, but do just the same." And she was only one of thousands of young girls working the mills during this crazy time in history. This is Sadie Pfeiffer. She was only 48 inches high. She was one of many small children at work in Lancaster cotton mills. November 30, 1908. Others were so young and didn't know any other way. Work like this was normal for them. 2 young workers, a raveler and a looper, in Loudon Hosiery Mills, Tennessee, in December of 1910. A group of tired girls stand and pose for Hine's camera outside the mill during a short break from their laborious tasks. 14-year-old Maddie Lott was a spinner in the Brazos Valley Cotton Mill, West Virginia. The girl was running 6 sides, which was a violation of the law. While young girls toiled at the looms and spindles, their brothers were never far behind. Boys, some no older than 7 or 8, worked in the same cotton mills, doffing spindles, fixing threads, and crawling beneath dangerous machinery to keep production moving. Like their sisters, they endured long hours, low pay, and unsafe conditions, all in the name of industry. Noon hour in an Indianapolis furniture factory on a day in August, 1908. Willie, one of the young spinners in the Quidwick Company Mill in Anthony, Rhode Island. He was taking his noon rest in a doffer box on this day in April of 1909. In sardine canneries in Maine, tiny children with knives removed heads and tails from slippery fish. In the South, kids shucked oysters before and after school. They lived in labor camps and worked up to 14 hours a day. This young shrimp picker, Manuel, is only 5 years old. He is standing on a mountain of child labor oyster shells that surround him and does not understand a word of English. This is Mary Morris, 9-year-old oyster shucker. She can do 4 or 5 pots a day, shucks every day, and also tends the baby. In Connecticut, children hunched over rows of shade-grown tobacco. In Canton, Delaware, the Arneo family worked together on Hitchens Farm. The children were 3, 6, and 9. A photographer found them laboring in the fields on May 28, 1910. These kids weren't on break from school. This was their life. These 2 young girls worked barefoot in the cotton fields in the baking heat of the day, carrying sacks as big as their own bodies. While Bertha Marshall, a berry picker on Jenkins Farm in Rock Creek near Baltimore, picks about 10 boxes of berries a day at only 2 cents a box. These kids were used to poverty, and it was common to see girls like these 3 sisters dressed in tatty clothes and no shoes. Then there were the newsboys, or newsies. Some as young as 5 years old, they worked long hours in all weather late into the night for only a few cents a day. At just 12 years of age, Lewis Birch sold papers on the streets of Wilmington, Delaware, to support his widowed mother. He stayed out until 12:30 a.m. In St. Louis, Missouri, young newsies smoked cigarettes at Skeeter's Branch. It wasn't unusual back then to see young boys smoking cigars or cigarettes. A photo shows a bootblack in New York City, his face somber, his clothes worn. Messenger boys fared little better. In Hartford, Connecticut, some worked until 10 p.m. on alternating nights, braving weather and traffic to keep cities connected. Their footsteps carried the messages that kept the world moving. Taken in 1911, this photo shows 3 young pinboys taking a break outside Les Miserables bowling alley in Lowell, Massachusetts. Joseph Phillip told Hine he was 11 years old, but these kids were streetwise and knew when to lie. He worked in Les Miserables bowling alley until midnight every night for very little money, and was grateful for what he got. In Danville, Virginia, a young girl named Ethel Shoemate rolled cigarettes. She claimed she was 13, but her size and her face told a different story. Each of these photos told a story that was previously unseen. Lewis Hine understood that images could stir the public in ways dry statistics could not. Through his lens, the forgotten children of America found a voice. Public outrage grew, and political pressure followed. His photographs were published in newspapers, magazines, and reports. They were used in courtrooms, in congressional hearings, and in legislative campaigns. By 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act had passed, setting minimum working ages and maximum hours. Child labor, though not erased, had finally been driven out of the shadows. These photographs remind us that progress is not always forward, and justice is never guaranteed. It took the courage of a man with a camera and the silent suffering of children to shake a nation's conscience. Their faces live on, frozen in time, to remind us that the fight for dignity, for protection, and for the innocent is never done. These are the photographs that ended child labor in America and brought about change worldwide, thanks to the work of an ordinary man with an extraordinary insight and compassion for those less fortunate than himself.